Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips. And I have some announcements, lots of free stuff coming up, and also some paid stuff that you might be interested in. So the first thing is non-member preview. If you are not a member of Wellness Forum and you would maybe thinking about it, I give a video tour of our libraries and websites and all that sort of thing, and then engage in a short Q&A free. To let you see what being a member is all about and what you would get to participate in. I've scheduled two upcoming, May 3rd at 7, that's tomorrow, and May 13th at 11:30, that's on a Saturday. And so if you have not done one of these before, strongly recommend. We offer a lot of great stuff, and most people have no idea how vast our libraries and videos and all that sort of thing are. If you're a healthcare worker or would like to be, I offer free workshops regularly, Reinventing Yourself in Independent Practice, May 4th, and a sample class, May 10th. So we still have a month before summer semester, and if you're thinking of enrolling, and we have had some inquiries about doing another fast track program, which we've done a couple of times to really do this in a shorter period of time because people want to get started faster. So let me know if that interests you. Research bootcamp is tonight. Vaccines, May 8th. Cancer, May 15th. These are shortened versions, bootcamp style, of long, expensive classes that I teach that sometimes people just don't want to do all that work and everything. So these are viable alternatives. And then tribe, forming your tribe to survive this whole disastrous stuff that we're going through right now. It's very uncertain times and all that kind of thing. May 13th and May 17th coming up, okay? So lots of opportunities to learn about how to start groups in your area and that kind of thing. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I was asked to do this by a colleague of mine who saw this study about olive oil and cancer. So the question is, does olive oil reduce the risk of cancer? And according to a new systematic review and meta-analysis, the answer is yes. The authors conducted a systematic review and meta-analysis of all of the available epidemiological studies that have examined the association between olive oil consumption and cancer risk or prognosis. 45 studies were included, 37 of those were case control, and 8 were cohort studies. And the conclusion was the highest olive oil consumption was associated with a 31% lower risk of cancer when compared to lowest consumption. The risk reduction was expressed in relative terms. In absolute terms, the results are much less impressive. And I had just put out a video a couple weeks ago where we were talking about the absolute versus relative risk reduction. Relative always sounds better. But for this particular review, I'm going to focus on the limitations of the study, most of which were acknowledged by the researchers and included in the article. And then I'll conclude with what you might make out of all this. All right, so the first problem, which the researchers identified themselves, the data were self-reported by study subjects, a method known to be highly inaccurate, which, again, the authors acknowledge. People often don't remember what they ate. They underreport consumption of alcohol and second helpings and desserts and other things they think are unhealthy, and then over-report fruits and vegetables, which they think are better foods, and they are. Even a slight variation, as you might imagine, can completely skew research conclusions. An example, and this was not included in the article, NHANES surveys are conducted by the USDA asking people in the United States about their eating habits. Most people report, you're going to hope you're sitting down, that they eat fewer calories than the minimum required just to maintain their weight. This means that we should live in a country of underweight people. And if you were out at all this past weekend among people, you know that that's certainly not the case. According to Edward Archer, PhD, during 39 years of gathering NHANES data, calorie intake for 67.3% of women and 48.7% of men was not physiologically plausible. Obese women underreported their calorie intake by an average of 854 calories per day. Okay, so problem number one, self-reported data. In the case control studies, food frequency questionnaires were used, and data were obtained via structured interviews for most. Now, this is another issue associated with self-reported data because subjects are asked about their consumption of foods and beverages when food frequency questionnaires are used, and sometimes they include portion sizes, sometimes not. The usual number of foods is between 80 and 120, and typical questions would be, how often do you eat a half a cup of rice? How often do you eat berries? I think most people find that difficult to answer. I'm pretty aware of what I eat. I'm in the business of helping people to improve their diet. That's one of the things that we do. And I really can't tell you how often I eat berries. I guess my best answer would be every chance I get. It's becoming berry season in Ohio here, right? Well, responses rely on memory of the subjects, and subjects in intervention groups tend to misreport their data to a greater extent than do controls. Significant publication bias was noted by the authors for overall cancer risk, breast cancer, and gastrointestinal cancer risk. Publication bias, in case you're not familiar with the term, is defined as the failure to publish results of a study based on the direction or strength of study findings, which can result in only studies which have statistically positive results being published, while those that are not statistically significant or even negative are not published because the authors deem them to be a failure, which is really not true, because negative findings can add to the body of evidence and make it easier to arrive at an accurate conclusion. This impacts systematic reviews and meta-analyses more frequently than other types of studies, and often means that any recommendations or guidelines that are derived from these reviews need to be taken with a grain of salt. Another issue, high olive oil intake may be just one factor in a healthier overall dietary pattern. The authors acknowledge that the majority of the studies included in their analysis did not provide much detail about intake from different food groups or nutrients within those food groups. They also acknowledge that 30 out of 45 studies were limited to Mediterranean populations where olive oil is commonly consumed, while this might not be the case for Americans, for example. There was no detail about the type of olive oil consumed, and it's well known that the concentration of antioxidants, polyphenols, and other constituents that might be responsible for the lower cancer risk is highly variable depending on the quality of the olive oil consumed. The authors also note that the number of case control studies and hospital-based controls are likely susceptible to both information and selection bias. So I'll explain that a little bit. Information bias is the distortion of the measurement of the association due to lack of accurate measurement of important variables. An example would be not enough information about overall diet and lifestyle patterns that might be important confounders, which is what I mentioned above. We don't really know the entirety of these people's diet and lifestyle habits. Selection bias occurs when individuals in a study are not representative of the target population about which conclusions are going to be made. Furthermore, the authors acknowledge that there were concerns about missing information on follow-up with subjects in the included studies, which is a potential source of bias and can compromise a study's validity. So my thought about all of this is that the authors report that olive oil reduces the risk of cancer significantly, and then tell you all the reasons why their results might not be very reliable. And I agree. I mean, I don't think I have to talk about how distorted the 31% reduction rate is. It's much lower than that when you look at absolute data. But anyway, here are my comments that I'll add to it. Cancer is a complex disease that is caused by many factors. One of the books I recommend to every cancer patient who contacts me is Radical Remission by Kelly Turner. She surveyed 1,000 cancer patients with very severe or fatal prognoses. And they reported 9 different strategies that they used to survive, one of which was diet. So diet's one of the factors, but the likelihood that a person adding olive oil to his diet resulting in a reduced risk of cancer is kind of ridiculous on its face. It doesn't have magical properties, for crying out loud. And then to that, I'll add, oil is one of the most calorie-rich foods on the planet, 120 calories and 14 grams of fat per tablespoon. Being overweight is a major factor for cancer and many other diseases too. So adding high-calorie, high-fat foods to the diet for Americans, 2/3 of whom are overweight or obese, is just not a valuable option, in my opinion. So the bottom line about this, does olive oil reduce the risk of cancer? Well, I don't think we can definitively say what it contributes to risk reduction, but certainly this study doesn't point to the fact that we can go out and tell the world that, yes, olive oil reduces the risk of cancer. The authors acknowledge a lot of limitations in their review. So I don't think on the basis of this, anybody should start adding olive oil to their diet. It doesn't approve, the analysis doesn't prove that olive oil is a health promoting food that reduces the risk of cancer. So I was glad somebody asked me to do this. I knew I was going to get asked about it because people who follow me know that I have advised for years to stay away from oils for a variety of reasons, and cardiovascular disease, cancer, weight gain, all kinds of things. And this study does not change my mind. And I don't think anybody that who reads the entire study would be swayed by it either. One other thing, while we're talking about controversial studies and all that sort of thing, I've been asked for a long time to do a workshop on collagen, which I'm going to offer next week. It's for members who are professional or above. Also this month, we are going to talk about this book, Toxic Legacy, about glyphosate. That's another thing that comes up all the time. So I chose a book by somebody who I respect, and I'm going to report what the book says and evaluate the references and the whole 9 yards. So if those are topics that interest you, this might be a good time to think about joining Wellness Forum Health. All right, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you tomorrow with more news.